Court has now 5 times in a row struck down Ninth Circuit rulings that restrict worship under COVID rules. One of the things California has gotten in the habit of doing is very much like states like New York when there are gun rules. They keep the rule in place until the Supreme Court decides to take the case, and then gets rid of the rule before the Supreme Court takes the case and says, well, it's moot. You can't hear the case now. This is what the gun rights or the gun control people did in New York. Remember, New York City had a law that you were not allowed to take your gun out of your home except to go to a gun range within the city of New York City. And the case went to the Supreme Court and they scrapped the rule because they knew what would happen at the Supreme Court. And they said, well, the issue's moot now. And this is what California is doing with their religious orders in the pandemic. They get to the Supreme Court and they cancel the rule and say, well, you can't hear the case. And the Supreme Court said, actually, we're going to hear the case anyway. And they overruled the Ninth Circuit, saying that you've got to hold comparable standards. Now, what Elena Kagan points out in her dissent is that it didn't matter whether it was a religious gathering or a birthday party or a holiday celebration, no more than 3 families in a house. What the court is saying is that you're allowing multiple families and people in a box at a stadium for a game. That's kind of ridiculous when you're reducing the number of people in a private home who may sit outside and ultimately still have to navigate and make decisions for themselves. California has done this repeatedly with worship services, and the Supreme Court at first, remember with John Roberts and the 4 justices of the left, John Roberts, who now I guess is more and more the moderate on the Supreme Court, allowed Nevada to treat casinos and churches differently. And I think that kind of radicalized some of the other members of the Supreme Court, saying this isn't right, that we are allowing these courts to do this. Amy Coney Barrett, I think, had stepped down or didn't participate. One of the justices, conservatives, didn't participate in that decision, and so it was Roberts and the liberals on the court were able to make that decision for Las Vegas. And now Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch, Donald Trump's appointees, are striking back on religious liberty grounds. By the way, this is a bigger issue, and the left's antagonism towards this issue, I mean, there were really vocal meltdowns on social media over this case over the weekend, and it has nothing to do with this particular case. There is a case pending before the United States Supreme Court. They are awaiting the decision. In that case, the city of Philadelphia punished Catholic charities and demanded that they stop handling adoptions and foster care because, as you can probably guess, the Catholic charities did not wish to deal with same-sex couples and transgender people wanting to adopt or foster kids. Whether you like it or not, 2,000 years of Christian orthodoxy is marriages between a man and a woman. God creates us male and female. We don't get to do it ourselves. In fact, in Genesis, the word bara is used for God creates us male and female, meaning that's a word that only applies to God. We ourselves can't create in that way. And this is basic Christian orthodoxy. Whether you're Protestant, Orthodox, Catholic, it doesn't matter. God bara, God created us in a way that we ourselves don't get to create. So you can disagree with this if you want, but it's 2,000 years of Christian orthodoxy shared by like 2-3 billion people on planet Earth. And the city of Philadelphia came in and essentially told Catholic charities, you must give up your 2,000 years of common orthodoxy shared globally by Christians if you want to participate in this government program to help place kids in foster care or with families to be adopted. And the Catholic charities said, nope. And they got and they had to sue. And this case has gone to the Supreme Court. As you can imagine, the writing is on the wall that the Supreme Court is going to say you have to allow people of faith to uphold their orthodoxy, and you've got to allow people of faith to participate in government programs without sanction against them for being unwilling to abandon their long-settled religious practices. Now, of course, the left throws out these crazy curveballs. Well, what if cannibalism is your religious view? I guess I get to still kill people and eat them. Well, actually, there are other standards of faith and standards of the Supreme Court that you can't cause bodily harm to someone. This, by the way, is one reason the left has moved on from sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt me, to words are literal violence. Because if you say something someone doesn't like who deals with these issues, that's got to be translated into violence. Why? Because there is Supreme Court precedent out there that you can believe whatever you want to believe as long as your belief does not inflict harm on someone else. If words are literal violence, then when you quote St. Paul in Corinthians on sin, including sexual sin, then suddenly you're doing literal violence to the alphabet gang. If Catholic Charities can say, I'm sorry, we don't adopt to single people or we don't adopt to same-sex couples because it violates our religious beliefs, well, then you're doing literal harm to that person. Now, notice the little twist here. It's who is being harmed. The alphabet gang would tell you they're being harmed. What about the child? What about the child? Essentially, the state's argument in Philadelphia, the city's argument, is that we should reduce the number of places through which a child might be adopted because some of those places only want to adopt into two-parent heterosexual nuclear households. And so we should shorten or reduce the ability of a child to be adopted lest we offend certain other groups. And this Supreme Court case on Friday in California about the pandemic, that you can't treat sectarian and secular groups differently, you can't treat sectarian and secular situations differently, is actually a pretty big smoke signal that the Supreme Court is probably going to side with Catholic Charities. And so the left is more enraged by that than they are the actual COVID restriction, which, by the way, California got rid of to avoid this court ruling. In fact, when you read the decision, the majority opinion points out that this is increasingly a pattern on the left, that they will they will get rid of a regulation if it heads to the Supreme Court, knowing the Supreme Court might strike it down. And so the Supreme Court is saying, you know what, we're no longer going to just say this is moot when you do this, because you're very clearly doing it, anticipating our result. And in many of these cases, what happens is the Supreme Court has said, well, the situation is moot, they got rid of it. And the moment the Supreme Court does that, they reimpose the regulation and the lawsuit has to start all over again. Now, I have a suspicion. I think this is going to happen. And I think, let me read you this paragraph again. It's the last paragraph of the Wall Street Journal decision, or op-ed. The decision is the fifth time the court has overruled the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on pandemic orders against worship, as an exasperated majority points out. The willfulness of the lower courts in defying the high court underscores how much religious liberty needs protecting against the militant secular values that now dominate American public life. I have a theory. If you will recall, during the Trump administration, progressives would find liberal activist judges to halt, overrule, delay, enjoin the Trump administration. The Supreme Court only takes so many cases a year for consideration. My guess is what's going to happen is the left now is going to use the left-leaning circuit courts and district judges to create so many cases that the Supreme Court can't take them all, or at least they think the Supreme Court won't take them all. So you get some bad court precedent around the country in ways that will make it harder for the conservative justices to make sure that the Constitution is being followed. So, for example, you may see a continued flood of pandemic orders that violate religious liberty. You may see a continued flood of orders upholding religious persecution engaged in by the Biden administration. in ways that overwhelms the Supreme Court, such that the Supreme Court can't strike them all down. And you will see bigger circuit court splits. Now, what will happen is when there are circuit court splits. Now, let me explain what a circuit court split is for those of you who don't know. The nation is divided up into, now how many are there? How many circuit courts are there? There are 13. There are 13 circuit courts. Yep. The 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and then the District of Columbia Circuit applies to cases that come out of D.C., and the Federal Circuit comes out of Federal Circuit has subject matter jurisdiction for patents, copyrights, and the like. So you got these 13 courts. The Trump administration was able to prioritize circuit court appointments and shifted a number of them to the right. But the circuit courts, what they typically do is they make 3 judge decisions. And so you could potentially get like 2 Obama court judges and a Trump appointee on this three judge panel for the circuit court, and it rules for the left, and then it's got to go to the full circuit. And if you overwhelm the system enough, you can get a lot of bad law. So circuit court splits come about when, say, the 11th Circuit and the 5th Circuit. The 11th Circuit handles Georgia, Alabama, Florida. The 5th Circuit handles Texas and Louisiana. And so you can get those 2 courts disagree with each other. So in Texas and Louisiana, the law of the land says X, and in Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, the law of the land says Y, because the circuit courts disagree. And you've got to follow what your circuit court says. And those are the cases that go to the Supreme Court. Whenever there's a major circuit court split, it goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has to decide ultimately which side to go with. What I think we're going to start seeing is a greater number of circuit court splits around the country as the left, as best they can through the circuit courts the left still controls, create a bunch of decisions, just a slate of decisions that will ultimately force the Supreme Court to get involved. The question is, how many of these cases can the Supreme Court take in a year? And do they wait out? Maybe, they're trying to pressure Justice Breyer to retire. Clarence Thomas is getting up in age. What happens? The next 2 years are going to be very interesting to watch this fight play out. But I can tell you right now, there is a 5-4, and really it probably actually is 6-3 in a lot of these decisions with John Roberts. There's at least 5-4 majority on the side of religious liberty, which is great as Christian persecution ramps up in this country. Even though the left says it's not a thing, it clearly very much is becoming one.
News and